In this review, I'll be looking at a sadly underrated classic OVA that is, in my opinion, possibly the best horror anime OVA, if not one of the best horror anime of all time. Horror is a genre that has seldomly been successfully adapted into anime form. There is a very large number of great manga that have portrayed horror very successfully in that medium, but when adapted into an anime, the results are very often disappointing. For whatever reason, it seems like it's been difficult for animators to bring horror effectively into anime and actually make it feel creepy or scary. In this review, I'll be looking at Umezu Kazuo no Noroi, or The Curse of Kazuo Umezu, which in my opinion is one of the best horror anime and one of the few that actually maintain a pretty cool, creepy atmosphere and are one of the ones that I would put on if I was looking for something to watch on Halloween or when I'm in the mood to watch something spooky. This is a one-episode OVA released in 1990. It consists of two parts, each one being a horror story written by horror manga artist Kazuo Umezu, who is someone that I've talked about several times on this channel, him being one of, if not the most important figure in horror manga and being extremely influential in that medium. The stories in this animation came from a 1986 collection of Umezu Kazuo short stories by the same title, The Curse of Kazuo Umezu. This OVA was animated by a studio called Takahashi Studios. It seems like they were a small studio that only put out a handful of animations in their time. The only other one besides this one that I've heard of is an OVA called Alice, which was based on a manga written by Lupin III creator Monkey Punch. It even seems much of the staff that worked on this OVA are pretty unknown. For example, when looking up the director, Naoko Omi, this was the only anime that I could find that she had directed, and the writer, Shira Shimazaki, as far as I know, only has writing credits on one other animation. I'm going to guess that the budget wasn't very high for this animation, which just makes it even more impressive how well it actually turned out. The first story is called What Will the Camera Reveal? The first story is about a girl named Masami whose peaceful life is disrupted when a new transfer student transfers into her class. The new student, a girl named Rima, is a strikingly beautiful girl who is instantly popular with everyone in the class, everyone except for Masami, who for some reason is terrified of her. Masami then begins to have horrible nightmares and awakes with a strange mark on her neck. As her nightmares worsen and the mark on her neck gets more and more severe, as well as hearing from her grandfather that he heard something enter into her room through the window at night, she begins to believe that Rima has something to do with it and eventually comes to the conclusion that Rima is coming to her at night and feeding on her like a vampire. Whenever Masami brings up any concerns she has with any of her classmates just think that she's jealous of Rima's beauty and popularity with the boys of the class. Eventually she tells her theory about Rima to one of the boys in the class, and he comes up with a plan to put a camera in Masami's room and film her while she's asleep to see if Rima comes through the window and attacks her. That night, Masami wakes up from her worst nightmare yet and believes that Rima had come in the night and attacked her. Her classmate named Umezu rushes into the room when he hears Masami wake up screaming in the middle of the night and checks the tape to see what happened. When he watches the tape, he's terrified by what he sees, and Masami becomes too afraid to watch the tape after seeing how horrified he was after watching what was on the video. The next day, Masami walks past Rima's house and sees Rima being carried out in a sickly state. She believes that Rima is in this state because she was thwarted in her attempt to feed on Masami while she was asleep, and now, since she wasn't able to feed, she's in a sickly state. When Masami arrives at school, she finds out from her friends that Rima had suddenly transferred out to another school unexpectedly. With Rima now seemingly gone, Masami now gathers the courage to check what was on the tape from the night that she was attacked. And I won't spoil the ending of the story for you, but the contents of the tape reveal something far more horrifying than Masami had ever expected. The second story, called The Haunted Mansion, starts off with two students named Miko and Nanako who are really into horror movies and love the feeling of being scared and the feeling that watching these movies bring, especially Nanako, who's the one who puts on these horror movie marathons that the two watch. After one of the friends' movie watching sessions, Nanako gets the idea to visit a nearby house that's rumored to be haunted. There's many rumors and urban legends as to what has happened at that house and why it is haunted, Miko has heard that murders have taken place there, while Nanako has heard that someone committed suicide by lighting themselves on fire there. Nanako really wants to check out the house and explore it before it's set to be demolished, and eventually is able to convince Miko to go with her at night and check it out. On the way there, they run into several of their other friends, and they all decide to go into the house together. The group goes through and explores the old dilapidated house, and everything is kind of the typical haunted house setup, with the dark, old, dusty, cobweb-filled, creepy rooms. The only real notable things that are different about this house is the portrait of presumably the owner of the house, and what is probably the creepiest room in the child's room that they find, that's filled with old toys and dolls. While noting how creepy and lifelike the doll that they find is, Miko has a vision where blood starts to spill from the walls of the house and the toys in the room. When she snaps out of the vision, she notices the figure of a woman approaching them in the shadows. Once the woman approaches, she reveals her face to be that of a horrifying, decaying corpse. The girls try to flee, but the ghost pursues them, and as the ghost approaches them, their limbs begin to split apart as if they're being torn apart like stuffed animals being torn at the seams. One by one, each girl is ripped into pieces as the ghost approaches them, and Miko, while fleeing, ends up falling down the stairs and passing out. In the morning, she wakes up in her bed, wondering if what happened the night before was real or just a dream. When she gets to school, she finds all her friends that were at the house the night before are also there and have woken up that morning with a similar experience as she did. The only strange thing that they noticed about themselves is that they now had scars that corresponded to the wounds they received the night before. No one in the group is really sure if what happened the night before actually happened or if it was all some type of dream or something. So they decide to return to the house and see if they can find any clues to help them determine what has happened. Once they return to the house, they get a horrifying revelation that once again is a bit of a twist ending that I won't spoil in this review. The two stories aren't connected in any way, and the only other part of the animation is a short part where a narrator introduces the stories. I think this narrator is supposed to be sort of like a stand-in for Umezu Kazuo, although it is not voiced by him. The first thing I noticed right off the bat when watching this OVA is how well they captured the Umezu Kazuo style in this animation. The way that the characters look and their expressions and the creatures and everything look exactly like they were pulled right out of the manga and put onto the screen. They also do a really good job of maintaining that creepy atmosphere that the manga has throughout the entire animation. I said earlier that much of the staff hadn't really worked on too many other anime before this one, and the one real exception to that is the animation director and character designer Junko Abe, who did a really amazing job in both roles on this OVA. She did animation on a few notable projects before this and would actually go on to have a very successful career working on anime, eventually even being the key animator on several pretty high-profile animated films such as Millennium Actress and The Girl Who Leapt Through Time. And you can definitely see some of that talent that she's showing earlier in her career on this OVA. Another real high point in this OVA is the soundtrack and the sound design that really helps build the tension and maintain a creepy atmosphere. They do a good job of keeping atmospheric ambience through the slower parts of the story and ramping things up and building the tension before the more horrific scenes in the animation. I enjoyed both of the stories, and I think they were both solid picks out of the collection of stories that they could have chosen from. I did like the first story more than the second though. I thought they did a pretty good job of keeping a pretty mysterious feeling leading up to the reveal at the end, and I really liked the twist at the end. I thought the visuals were especially great here, and I really love the monster design. I'm always a big fan of these monster transformations in these old anime, and this is one of the best. The monster has a really horrifying design with a transformation that I thought was pretty unique, and I remember being really shocked the first time I saw the transformation. And I think that probably the most memorable part of the animation is the monster from the first story. I'm not sure if any further episodes were ever planned or considered, but there was definitely enough material in the collection to make more episodes if they chose to. And I think it's a real shame that they never made any more episodes, because these were such a good representation of Umezu Kazuo's work. You really don't see that many horror anime being made, especially back then, and many of the ones that do get made are crossing over more into sci-fi or action and other types of genres rather than a straight horror story. So it was really great to see an old OVA that just went with a straight up horror genre that is pretty rare to see in anime. And even better yet, actually successfully pulling off a creepy atmosphere and actually having it feel a little bit scary. I'm going to give this one 4 stars out of 5. I would understand if you think that's kind of a high score for a fairly unknown short OVA, but I really think that they did a great job with this one and made an animation that was a really rare case of actually bringing out the best things about the source material and actually creating a legitimate horror anime that doesn't come off as silly or goofy and actually has a good horror atmosphere and some genuinely creepy moments. In my opinion, this is one of the best horror anime of all time and probably the best of its era. And that's going to do it for this video. Thanks so much for watching. Please like the video because it does really help my channel out a lot, and definitely subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. And thanks so much for watching.